Yes, so the common misconceptions are typically that the technique is way too complex to use, that you wouldn't use it in a routine lab environment. But I think if we look at the applications that you see also here at Milan at the conference, that this is not the case at all. So the typical hurdles that prevent us from using this technique, there's actually 3 of them. So the first is the detection sensitivity. People are afraid to use this technique because of their fear that the second dimension, this second dimension that you use in 2D-LC, dilutes the sample way too much. I would say this is not the case with the introduction of active modulation techniques in the last few years. And then there is the applicability, so solvent mismatch, which is also tackled by this system. And finally, there's the method optimization part, the method development part. So there is a lot of method development that you need to do if you want to use the technique. But with the recent introduction of these algorithms that can basically help you through prediction how to optimize your method as efficient as possible, this is no longer the case. So we believe that with a few measurements, you can already scan your sample, regardless of what the sample is, as long as you know which columns to use, essentially, and then get a good method out in a matter of days instead of months that you typically now have to use. Yeah, it is definitely becoming a much more used technique as a whole. So the active modulation techniques that were introduced a few years ago really have sparked something. You also see it at the conferences. So in any of these meetings, there's more and more multidimensional sessions. But what you mainly see it in is in the number of publications that are being developed, and especially the industrial partners that are being involved in this. So especially in the polymer industry, I would say you cannot live anymore without 2D-LC at all. So you see that most polymer applications that are being developed in any type of chromatography always concern multidimensional nowadays. And this is mainly true for comprehensive 2D-LC. Non-comprehensive 2D-LC also has like a spearhead industrial field, which is more the pharma, biopharma. So for peak impurity profiling, for example. So the 2D-LC database that you refer to is basically a way for us to provide more insight in what is in literature. So I would say that nowadays, if you are in industry, you don't have time to spend hours or maybe days finding your literature, especially since 2D-LC or multidimensional chromatography as a whole. It has all of these bells and whistles, which makes it very difficult to search what you're looking for. On the other hand, you have in academia us people that are writing all of these reviews that typically list the most recent applications, and then this paper, this review, ends up on a pile and you will never see it again, or maybe you know where to find it. So we thought that especially nowadays it would make more sense to have some website about it. So in a recent review that I did with Dwight Stoll, we had such a list of reviews of publications, and we thought, okay, maybe it is a good idea to make an online searchable database in which you can just select and filter out what you're interested in. So that's one side. And the other side, so the MorePeaks itself, which stands for Multivariate Optimization and Refinement Tool for optimizing key separations and giving more data insight in it. It's basically giving you the ability to use whatever is being developed in academia, so in the terms of chemometrics. So you have these nice data analysis algorithms, but also we as a group previously developed a method optimization program, and we always had this feedback back, yes, it's really great what you all do, but we cannot use any of it. I mean, we don't, as an industrial partner, we don't program these things ourselves, so can you maybe get us something? And on the academic side, there's often a limit of budget that prevents us from getting the latest software. So we thought, okay, if we just look at what is commonly being requested and used in industry, put it together in a program that basically allows us to use it. And also on that note, I would like to say that if any new points that maybe readers or viewers like to see in such a program or algorithms that they're interested in, maybe if that is interesting to them, we could also put it in the program. Yeah, so this is a typical example of how we typically interact with industry or with private partners, so to say. So the Cultural Heritage Agency of the Netherlands had a working method, 1D LC-MS, for dyes and pigments, but you saw that it was not really satisfactory. So it was not sufficiently capable of identifying and resolving analytes that were in this solvent mixture. So knowing that 2DLC may be useful there, they approached us and said, hey, could you maybe do something for us in two-dimensional liquid chromatography? So this is basically where it came from. Yeah, so these are big terms. Active modulation is basically a way to resolve the sensitivity issue. So in general, analysts will benefit a lot from this in the cultural heritage field if they are able to see more of these low trace compounds in their sample. So active modulation in this particular case allows us to pre-concentrate the sample between one dimension and another. It resolves the dilution issue that you typically have with multidimensional chromatography, and it provides the detector that is following the second dimension much more sharp and concentrated peaks. So you, in other words, if you compare a multidimensional method with and without active modulation, you see that the one with active modulation gives you a much better view of your sample. There's much more to see. And then on the other hand, there's the shifting gradients, and that basically, we can be very quick about that. It allows us to more effectively use the separation space that we have. So there's more room for peaks, which means that you can analyze more compounds. Definitely, we can make an endless list. So whether it's polymers, you can definitely use it there. In fact, this is one of the points where active modulation, so the active solvent modulation subtype of it, for example, is being used a lot right now. Pharmaceutical analysis, environmental analysis, it doesn't matter what. So these approaches are not specific to a specific application field, but they're more general. The advantages are applicable for every field. Yeah, so reaction modulation is really the next step in our opinion. So active modulation is slowly beginning to become established, and it is really pulling 2DLC as a technique upward. But then there's the reaction modulation, where we can do what we couldn't do before. So we have two-dimensional separation, as we always have in 2DLC. And then this allows us to profile our sample on, for example, two sample dimensions. So maybe we are interested in ion exchange and reverse phase. So this gives us a correlation of charge and hydrophobicity. But suppose that we have, for example, a polymer with a certain distribution, so A, B, C, A, B, D, and we want to learn what the exact order is of these monomers. There's no chromatographic method that can give us this information. So what reaction modulation does, it changes your sample after a first analysis and basically, for example, digests or cuts or reacts it into pieces in a certain way that you can do an analysis on a totally different sample, which is intrinsically related to the original sample. And then that information you can use to obtain the sample dimension that you previously were not able to get. So this is the concept of reaction modulation, and potential examples are, for example, the polymers, which I talked about just now, but you also can think of light degradation. So this is related to the topic of the dye samples, where conservation scientists are interested in the degradation pathways of compounds, and the only way to relate a precursor dye and the degradants in a comprehensive way is to degrade them in the midst of the analysis. So this is another example. And then finally, of course, which is where the idea came from, is the proteomics field, so protein analysis, basically your online combination of top-down and bottom-up proteomics.